It's a trending topic. Why don't we have worldwide peace? Uh, I thought I'd just quickly explain spiritual humanism because that's a term I coined for myself. I wouldn't expect anyone to really know. It's just a simple causal chain of activating spiritual principles in my life. The first being I'm thankful for my life. That's my daily mantra. It's really effective when I'm having a hard time. Just say I'm thankful for my life. And then moving from that to respect for all life forms, all the creatures we share the planet with that have their own life and been given that gift. And then from there to walk and live in kindness as much as possible, to try to interact with all creatures in a kindly way. And when you do all those things, you end up in love, in a field of love, and just try to stay in that field as much as possible. So that's what it is. And the genesis for this topic really was from attending services for the last half a year or so. And then during the sharing periods, quite often there would be somebody who would share that they're sort of depressed or, not very happy because of the dark times that we live in, which I totally understand. There's a lot of dark times going on, always. And, I started thinking about that just because I've lived quite a few decades now. So I have a lot of memories of previous decades where there were things going on that weren't very bright. They were pretty dark. So I decided, well, and I've read some history going back way before I was alive, but I just did a quick Google check of, putting in things like tyrannical regimes, despotic dictators, wars, slavery, uh, all the bad things, that you can think about. Well, not all, but enough. And then the list comes up. And I did this so that it would go back through time. And it's just overwhelming. I mean, it's always there. The earliest one was in 3400 BC, where somebody recovered some writing. Uh, and I don't know if it was a tribe or sort of like a nation, but it was a description of how one group enslaved another. And so when I looked at all that, I really came to the conclusion that yes, I understand why we say it's dark times, but really, with regard to the human participation in the world, it's just normal times. It's normal. And we can't get away from that. And we can't look away from that. Um, so I wondered, well, why is it? It's not for lack of messaging. We've had many prophets throughout the centuries who have said wonderful things, and we've had secular speakers who also have promoted peace. And it pretty much coalesces around seeing the world as one family, all humanity, one family, treating the neighbor, the stranger, as a member of the family. And and it has worked for millions of people. I mean, it's spawned a lot of peace, but it hasn't spawned worldwide peace. And I started thinking, okay, so why is that? And I've done quite a bit of science reading about the birth of the universe, its expansion through time, and then the birth of our solar system and our planet and the relationship to the sun. And then life got started, we think, about 3 billion years ago on Earth. And I started wondering, are there some fundamental properties that exist within the universe and which gave rise to nature, which gave rise to our mother, which gave rise to us? Are there things operating in those big forces that make it hard for us to achieve worldwide peace? And I think that there are. So life has been around for a very long time. And through the process of nature and evolution, there's a species extinction rate that's really pretty benign. I mean, it varies from species to species, but each species, like a mammal, if it comes into existence, it can go about 1 million years before it passes passes away, and then a new species comes in. So there's a bit of a churn there that's always going on, even if the environment is somewhat benign. And if that's all that happened, I would say, well, that's not the reason why we don't have worldwide peace. But there's something different in terms of the 5 mass extinction events we've had in the history of our planet. And that's when 75% of all species go extinct in a period of within 2 million years or so, just as a general rule. And there are various reasons why this happened. One was a huge asteroid, which probably many of you have heard about, that impacted the Earth and caused catastrophic change to the environment. There's been periods where there's been very radical volcanic activity, which has totally changed the atmosphere and temperature and then caused massive die-off. We've had great change in sea levels, glaciation, and there's maybe one we don't know exactly what happened, but there's probably some change in the atmosphere, maybe with regard to oxygen. So it's pretty clear that at least the way the universe operates in relationship to our planet and the life on our planet, it doesn't really have any personal regard for whether a species lives or dies or any particular individual. That's just not an operant thing in the universe. And the universe has created this system of nature and evolution that applies to what we have going on now, right now on Earth. And it's pretty clear that, well, I want to step back 1 second. So I was at a service where we were talking about sanctuary through nature. And one of the questions to the audience was, what have you learned in your spiritual practice that nature has taught you? And one person responded and said, quit fighting. Look at the trees. The trees aren't fighting. And that's true. In human terms, they're not waving their branches around or anything and fighting like that. But if we had a time lapse video of this and we went back in time before that, say a mature forest was there, because we can walk in forests and many people report that they have a very deep spiritual connection when they're out in nature or if they're walking in a forest like that. They feel very connected. So here we are, we have probably low-lying vegetation of some sort, and then the first seeds would come from the forest to be, and those seeds would be planted, or they would start to sprout. And if they weren't eaten by like an herbivore, and they were lucky, they'd start growing up and they grow tall. And then as they, and this takes many years depending upon the species, and then it puts out the leaf canopy and then it propagates because life, that's a fundamental property of life, that life wants to live and it wants to create progeny. So then that tree sends out more seeds and you speed it up. And then pretty soon you've got this really big, deep forest. And what's happened to the old vegetation was there? Well, it died out. Couldn't get enough light because these trees want the light. They want to propagate, and they were very successful. And then also probably the insects and plants that were there, or the insects and animals, that probably changed a lot too. Because if you're not getting much sunlight down at the floor of the forest, then different kinds of bugs and animals live there. So, well, what do we learn from this? The trees don't fight, but the trees don't care if they push out the other life forms that were there before them. They have no empathy for them. So this is kind of a repeating principle in nature. And if let's look at another area where we go out into nature and say we're in a field of grass or a meadow, which people find generally beautiful. I do as well. And I feel very calm when I'm walking through there. And of course, one of the reasons we feel calm is that as our species spread out and became more technologically advanced, we got rid of all the big predators. So there aren't that many big predators around to come after us. And if we, you occasionally see someone will be attacked by an animal or something, and our response is we send somebody out to find that animal and kill it because we don't want any more people to be hurt. So that's like a veil of separation. The bear or the cougar or whatever it is has as much right to be on the planet as we do, but still we draw that line, and then we try to make sure that people are safe when we go out into nature, because we've uh, changed it quite a bit. But getting back to the meadow, um, it looks very peaceful. But if we were to zoom in and get down to the level of the insects and things, well, they're eating each other, right? And they're eating the plants, and the plants are going, whoa, I don't want to be eaten. And they create chemicals within themselves to make the insects not like the taste of it. So life is very adversarial. And we grew up in this system. So back, before Homo sapiens, because we're hardly a blip on the timeline, there were uh, earlier hominids that were versions that evolved into us. And quite often they were prey. And they had to really be on the lookout to protect themselves because, they were out scurrying for food and trying to find it. And it was very dangerous. So all of these kinds of things travel with us into our current time. And when we see the disruptions to peace, well, it's one thing really, and it's a veil of separation that comes down in the way humans look out into the world or look at each other. And when we see the various things, like somebody driving a car into a peaceful gathering, well, obviously that person had some sort of veil of separation where he or she, I don't know if it was a he or not, but he thought that those people didn't matter, or he was angry at them and they weren't part of his family, so he hurt them. Or if we have a war, it's because the people who are being treated poorly or being attacked is because they're the other. It's always the other. It's always the veil of separation. And nature works in that way because life eats life. We eat life. The plants, uh, they don't really eat life as much, except, for like a Venus flytrap or something. But for the most part, they're able to take in the sun and nutrients from the ground. But all the animal life forms and a lot of the microscopic life forms are eating life. So that's built into the system, and it usually when the predator is eating the prey, it's not done with empathy. Now, we have been blessed to have a bigger brain in Homo sapiens. So we're able to understand empathy, and we're able to have a conception of the one, but we have to actually live it, and we have to do it consistently. So there are periods where we have uh, relative peace, but it's always punctuated. And usually, I wouldn't say it's even all planet wide. Usually, there's something going on, even just between individuals, where we don't really have peace. So, how can we get there? And I think the last big hurdle that we have is that, we've been given these very large heads with brains, and the way that the human body has been reconfigured to be able to give birth to a child or a baby that has that big of a head. There's been changes in the female body with regard to where the organs are and everything, because most animals uh, give birth and it's pretty quick. I mean, the labor doesn't go as long. Whereas here, sometimes with the human births, it takes a lot longer. And then when the baby comes out, baby is totally uh, unprotected and it doesn't know how to do anything. So it takes a very long time to raise a child for Homo sapiens. Whereas out in nature, most animals, they're born and they're ready to go, like insects, or or some of the mammals, maybe it's 1 or 2 years to help them before they can go out on their own. But with a human being, we're looking at 17, 18, 19, 20 years to raise a baby into adulthood, and to raise them in a way where they understand the spiritual connection of all life and of all people. And if they don't have that, then they're going to have veils of separation. And then they're going to do things that aren't peaceful because they're going to otherize certain segments, or just another person, or like the stalker. That stalker is not seeing you as the family, or so there's a separation there. And there's so many points along those 17, 18, 19 years where the process can be interrupted. We all know this, the breakdown in society, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication and community to bring a human baby into a state of awareness where they're going to be able to live a peaceful life, even if something is tough that's going on in their life. And then we've never even been able to do it for like one generation. We have these artificial separations where, this generation was raised. If we could just raise one generation, where they were all living with a enhanced spiritual perception of being one family, then we might have peace. But that wouldn't guarantee us victory, because that's not the way it works. We're giving birth to babies every day, every hour, all over the planet. So we would have to have a total effort all over the world to raise people who would understand love, who would understand kindness, who would understand the connection that we would need to have in order to have worldwide peace. And the numbers, I mean, I would guess, I don't even know what it'd be. It'd have to be at least, I don't know, 95% success rate, because it only takes a small number of people living in separation to create havoc where worldwide peace is shattered. And that's what's been going on. Now, after having said all this, I'm still hopeful, because I don't want the alternative where we just keep going like this forever. And the other thing I found was interesting is that there are scientists who think that we've entered the 6th mass extinction event right now, because we have spread, and it's being caused by us. We have spread out our population so much that there's been a lot of habitat loss for the species that we share the planet with. So we're having a very high rate of species extinction right now. We're way past that background rate that I first talked about. And we're also changing the atmosphere with all the greenhouse gases. We've got to stop that, or we're going to have massive global warming. And I just read a story the other day about in North America how we're losing a lot of birds, way beyond normal. So we're sort of going into the precipice of another big event. Now I'm hopeful that, green energy is coming in, and perhaps we can change the way we interact with life and see it more as one family. I mean, that's the only way we're going to be able to get there. And then I forgot one thing I was going to mention, and I'll finish up here. We eat let me start. I've been a vegetarian for like, I don't know, 45 years. I just kind of blithely got into it because my first wife was a vegetarian and she was a cook. So I just started eating what she made for me. And I noticed, well, holy smokes, I'm feeling better. So I just stayed that way. I just kept being a vegetarian. And, but as I grew older, I realized, well, if I was going to eat like a steak or something, would I be willing to go up to a cow and kill it myself and cut it up and do all that work? No, I wouldn't do that. So in our society, is particularly Western society, not so much with indigenous people who have it more together with regard to population control, how they revere the animals, they don't overhunt, they're imbalanced in the environment. I'm fine with that because life eats life. That's the way it goes. There's no getting around that. But we go to the grocery store and we buy these packages of meat. And a lot of these animals, we take it out of the environment and put them in a farming environment, industrial farming environment, where they don't really get a life. They're not out in the sun. They're not having any sense of normalcy. And yet we have this veil of separation where we don't realize what we're doing when we're eating that meat. Is where it's not attached to what's going on, to what we're doing to certain species of animals. So that's something that's just shows how we can easily not even think about the separation that we're living in. We have to open up our minds and really see what's going on. So I hold on to hope. If any of you, get to a point where you get overrun with the darkness of the times, uh, reach out and get help, because the gift of life comes with the gift of agency. We get to make a difference in the world. And if we're only going to get to worldwide peace if everybody is contributing and everybody has different gifts to contribute. So we need to work through depression or sadness and focus in on what we can do to be loving and kind and aware of our relationship to the very systems that give birth to us, because if we don't, we'll extinct ourselves. So this is what we're facing, and that's my opinion as to why we don't have world peace. Thank you for your attention.